know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
And we are live. Greetings to our loyal WFYL listeners around the world. Welcome back to your Philadelphia live stream, only on the Freedom Station. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in once again, because you still have the right to hear and the right to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike G. As always, with me are Philly Chris, Russ the producer, and Liberty Lee. And you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters. And you can listen to our program every Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. So let's be heard. I want to remind our listeners that you can participate in the free and open exchange of thoughts and ideas throughout the entire week by visiting MikeGinTheMorning.com. What's it called, Philly Chris? I believe you're on mute, sir.
It's called PhillyChrisUnmuteHisMic.com. You're still muted.
You click the button on the... There should be a little microphone at the bottom, and there should be a line through it on the screen.
We still can't hear you.
He doesn't know how to click the screen, this guy.
Jeez.
Hey, he's too busy fixing his hair.
Yeah.
He really by now doesn't know how to unclick the microphone.
Yeah.
How about we have a substitute for Philly Chris? What's it called, Russ?
MikeGinTheMorning.com.
How about you, Liberty?
MikeGinTheMorning.com.
Dr. Val?
I think it's MikeGinTheMorning.com.
That is correct, sir. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your barber, tell your Uncle Jerry, tell anybody who listen to check us out at MikeGinTheMorning.com. I also want to remind our listeners about the powerhouse lineup we've got here at the Freedom Station. Kick off your mornings with Scott Adams, bringing you the Scott Adams Show weekdays from 9 a.m. until 11. We've got Rick Crump, friend of the Mike G in the Morning program, bringing you the Kinetic Faith, preaching value, service, and order, coming at you weekdays at 11 a.m. We've got the one, the only Dan the Man Bongino, bringing you the Dan Bongino Show, weekdays from noon until 3 p.m. Intellectual giant, he is the headliner. Ben Shapiro brings you the Ben Shapiro Show, weekdays from 3 to 5 p.m. And finally, a welcomed addition to the Freedom Station family, we've got Michael Knowles, bringing you the Michael Knowles Show, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. So don't forget to tune in and show him some love. And with that, you know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Hit it, Russ.
You know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
We've got a very special guest here with us on the Mike G in the Morning program here today. And I usually say that you're a friend of the program, Dr. Val, but I think at this point, I've got a new title to W you with. You are now the best friend of the Mike G in the Morning program. Do you accept, sir?
Yes, I'm also, I think you've referred to me in the past as a repeat offender.
A repeat offender for sure. In case you've been living under a rock, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Val Fennell is the Pennsylvania Director of Gun Owners of America. He's also a retired Air Force colonel and a disabled veteran. And he's here to tell us today about Gun Owners of America and the work that they've done in the Pennsylvania primary races that have gone on this past Tuesday. Dr. Val, it's been an exciting week for Pennsylvanians, hasn't it?
It's been a very exciting week and an exciting month, as everybody might be aware, and maybe not, is that because of all the redistricting nonsense, the whole process was delayed. It was like the last day in March, the petitions ended. We had 1 month to put together all of our primary endorsements and interviews and everything else that we had to do to get our endorsements out. You know, and normally we would have maybe two plus months to do that for that time. So everybody's exhausted on our Pennsylvania team, our volunteers, myself, and people in Washington have helped us out. We were really busy and working overtime. And, you know, our big race, of course, was Doug Mastriano. We got back behind Doug Mastriano on January 8th when he officially announced he was running for governor of Pennsylvania at the big Gettysburg announcement. So I was there for that.
I was going to say, I think I know a guy who was on the stage introducing him that day, don't I?
Yeah. So I was there. A number of other celebrities were there, and it was a great event. The room was packed. It was very high energy. Senator Mastriano, shares that characteristic with Donald Trump. That he can certainly pack a room and get people out to a rally. It's because of his leadership during the pandemic and the shutdown and standing up for the little guy and small business owners across the state. Well, Governor Tyrant Tom Wolf was trying to tell people who was essential and who was non-essential. People remember that. And of course, us for gun rights, Senator Mastriano was the guy who sponsored the bill, the Right to Bear Arms Protection Act, which is still pending in the state government committee. He was the prime sponsor of that. And we were behind him a year ago when that bill was introduced. So, it's rare that we have a candidate that's this good, who's not an establishment rhino candidate, who came from the outside, retired Army colonel, man of integrity, man of honor. And, we don't need more swamp creatures. And we need to fix Pennsylvania and undo the damage of the Wolf administration. But as you know, the dirty tricks were multiplied in this primary.
Sure, absolutely. Now, did you have a good idea early on that he would be somebody Gun Owners America would get behind because of his track record when it comes to the Second Amendment?
Yes, exactly. Well, he has 100% voting record, and then of course he was the prime sponsor of our main flagship bill in the Senate. There was two actually, constitutional carry, which made it to the governor's desk. The Senate bill was, it's just carbon copy of the House bill essentially, but we asked for it to be introduced in the Senate. And then the Right to Bear Arms Protection Act, which would make the state a Second Amendment sanctuary, or we call them a Second Amendment Protection Act in other states. And he was the prime sponsor of that, a very strong bill. And to put your name on something like that is amazing. We got the majority of the Republican caucus to sign on as co-sponsors, and that bill still has not moved. And maybe in June we'll get that rolling. And that's Senate Bill 624. But stepping out in front like that, putting your name on a bill to make Pennsylvania a Second Amendment sanctuary, to stop the overreach, to stop the tyranny that's happening right now from the ATF going after pistol braces or ghost
everything, going after everything, Dr.
Right. And we've had the P80 kit dealer here in Pennsylvania, JSD Supply, who's been a strong ally of ours, and he got a cease and desist letter. And the ATF is contradicting themselves, telling people it's okay to legal to sell something, and then turning around and reversing themselves because the political climate has changed more than likely. Right. And putting law-abiding people, law-abiding businesses, at risk and at peril. And this just is not acceptable. And we at least we can take a stand and say we're going to join the other states and become a Second Amendment sanctuary. And Doug Mastriano put his name on that bill. And just remember, folks, on the other side, Mastriano is going to be facing off against Josh Shapiro, who's the most rabidly anti-gun gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania history. Here's the man in December of 2019 who wrote an opinion trying to make pieces of metal and plastic firearms. Now, Attorney Mike, I know you're a man of the law. It's like, could you demonstrate to a jury how a piece of plastic can fire a bullet and expel?
Given enough time and resources, Dr. Val, you could turn a toaster into a helicopter, couldn't you? So where do you draw the line? If it's not 80, what about 79? What about 78? Right. And that's an example of what we're seeing with the ATF, really, right? At the ATF, it's a little bit worse because you've got these unelected bureaucrats who are really writing the law where that's not their place. Clearly, we've got a system under our Constitution,
right,
where laws are passed and you've got checks and balances.
Yes.
And there's none of that when it comes to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and writing these opinions, changing their mind, and turning around. So I hope people see exactly how dangerous it is when they have that sort of power. I want to back up just a little bit, Dr. Val,
Yeah.
because you talked about how you guys had to really scramble to go ahead and figure out who you were going to endorse
Oh, yeah.
for these primary elections. What about that process are you able to tell our listeners about what goes into determining who is somebody who gets the Gun Owners of America stamp of approval? Who's somebody? How do you get to that point where you say this is somebody where we could put our reputation on the line and we trust that they're going to support your Second Amendment rights?
As you know, it's an art, not a science. But for example, if you are an incumbent or if you're a currently seated legislator or public official, we look at your track record. You've got a voting record. That's the first thing, because that's why at GOA we always want to push for recorded votes, because they don't want to vote. Because if you don't vote, you don't have to go on record. So we got recorded votes on constitutional carry, for example, on strengthening our firearms preemption law. We want to try to get another one on the Second Amendment Protection Act that we have, that Mastriano has. So first is that track record of recorded votes. So if you voted wrong, or you voted for gun control, or you voted against the pro-gun bill, then you got dings against you in your record. The other thing that we do is we have a candidate survey. It's a number of questions. We ask them about, things are, what do they think of, semi-automatic rifles, one gun a month laws, you name it. It's in there. Strengthening firearms preemption, making the state a Second Amendment sanctuary. We send that out to, to candidates. And that's important for candidates who don't have a track record. But sometimes even the candidates who aren't incumbents fill it out too, because they want to show, every couple of years, 2 to 4 years, depending if it's House or Senate, and tell us, hey, where they stand on issues. Like, for example, we added ghost guns as an issue to the survey this year because of all the action that's going on about them. And then we do a candidate interview. Usually we call the candidate and we talk to them, especially for people we don't know. And if we have any inkling of endorsing them, and then we will make an endorsement based on those. So it's a process that we go through. It's not a perfect process, of course. We know Pat Toomey went through this process, and look what happened. But but that's the best we can do when we're dealing with human beings. So that's what goes into it. And then that whole time frame instead of 2 months, got compressed down to like 1 month, and we were just going like crazy. And we made some pretty good calls. And let me give you an example of track record. So there was a red flag type bill in 2018 that most of the Republicans voted for and got it passed. And we took out 2 incumbents, Stan Saylor and Keith Gillespie in York County, 2 state reps. And Joe Dorsey and Wendy Fink beat them. And we backed those primary races. And we let people know that it was because of their votes on House Bill 2060. And there was a coalition of other groups for other reasons that went after them too. If you do not hold them accountable, and people say, why are you going after us? Why don't you go after the Democrats? I mean, they're worse than we are. I said, oh, no. Discipline begins at home.
That's very true, because what's the point of getting out there and supporting them over a Democrat if they're not going to vote in the interest of their constituents, particularly law-abiding gun owners and firearms enthusiasts and people who just believe in our Second Amendment and understand our Constitution? I was going to say that it would be hysterical if part of the vetting process was just basically an open book test on the Second Amendment and the Declaration of Rights and the Constitution in general, right? Wouldn't that be hysterical?
Yes.
Good idea, Mike. Good idea.
Yeah. Yes.
Open book test. Let's see how you do. I'm sure you wouldn't receive half of them back because they wouldn't want to take the time to figure out what's in the Constitution.
And they don't want to go on record. And speaking of going on record, this is what's happened in the U.S. Senate race. We had given Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick multiple chances, multiple opportunities to answer our survey. Kathy Barnett did right up front. All right. And, but there was other candidates who did too. I think George Bachetto did. But,
did he not do well?
Not too bad. He was average, I would say, but he was not like Kathy. Kathy was like about 100%. But, so Kathy and Oz and McCormick were the top 3. And it's like, well, we have one person. And so we tried to give them every opportunity, especially Dave McCormick. Here's a guy that goes on TV and advertises with his brand new hunting outfit they just got at Cabela's. And stands out there with his shiny, it's like, yeah, you're a real hunter. Okay, I'm not judging you, but maybe you are. And it's like you claim to be a Second Amendment guy. Why don't you answer our survey? And we got multiple promises from him that he would do it, and never did.
Their silence is very telling.
Yeah, well, yeah, and worse than silence, he said he would do it, and he didn't. And to multiple people, our volunteers that went to meet him personally. I have his personal email. And then here we are a week before the primary, and Kathy Barnett surges in the polls. And I'm like, we're done waiting. We're going to push for Kathy. And we should, and be honest with you, we should have done it earlier. And so we pushed really hard, did a lot for her in that last week. And then the swamp creatures attacked.
That was really incredible.
Yes, it was.
What happened?
Disgusting.
Disgusting and scary. And it was really an eye-opening experience, so to speak, because I've known Kathy personally for years at this point. She's been on my program, I've been on her program, and with all candor to the audience, she's had a program on WFYL for quite some time, but I didn't know her outside of that. And to see the things that they came out and tried to pin on her, the things they tried to say about her, and the way the quote-unquote conservative media got behind it and kept pushing it forward, and they're total blatant lies.
Completely.
And I was thinking that had I not known her for several years, I might not have known that this was all a bunch of nonsense. And it makes you think, what happens in the other races where you don't know the candidate for an extended period of time personally to know, hey, I know this is total nonsense. How many of these lies are people buying out there? It's really disgusting, like you said.
Yes, and it was so bad, even CNN picked up on it. Okay, I mean, that tells you how bad it was. They did an article on how on the hatchet job, and this is what the swamp is producing, because she's a threat to their control agenda that's controlled by the big money from Washington, the money inside Pennsylvania politics. They don't want the outside people who are going to represent the constitutional rights of the citizens of Pennsylvania. They want the people who will be malleable and controlled and be responsible to the establishment. That is what they want. And we were very fortunate this year to be able to team up with make a loose coalition of other conservative and conservative libertarian organizations on that spectrum to go after certain rhinos. And you win some, you lose some. And we did get two. We took two down, Saylor and Gillespie. And this is the message that we're sending, is that, things have to change. It can't be all money and insider politics. That's what gets us in the trouble we got into. And so with integrity, we try to inform people what the votes are. If you voted against House Bill 2060, we pretty much went after you if you had a primary challenger. And that was the first time we did that. And so we have to send that message. We have to say, if you vote, again, I mentioned on this show before, we always try to connect legislative season with election season. And we have an attorney general on the opposite side who may have violated the law in putting together P80 kits for reporters, and then our rhino establishment in the House, Brian Cutler and Kerry Benninghoff, refused to put the man under investigation. Okay, could you imagine if a Republican did that?
Oh, forget it.
There'd be hearings like crazy. The Democrats would be hearings left and right. And everybody I mentioned that to, they say, Val, you're right. That's what they would be doing. What are they doing in Washington with J6 hearings? It's the same thing. They're putting people on trial, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's crazy. The left and the Democrats are not afraid to use their power. The Republicans are only really concerned, when I speak of Republicans, I'm thinking of the establishment in this context, they're only concerned about maintaining it. And
so what would be the reason for not doing that? They feel like there are people who would otherwise vote Republican, see that going on, and think they're abusing their power, and therefore they will not vote Republican. Is that, I'm trying to reverse engineer here, because
I think that it's like, we're better than them. We're not like them. We're going to be above that. And it's like, well, no, you're not. And I said, first of all, what we gave you wasn't total BS like it is on the left. All right. Like with a lot of this stuff on J6, a lot of this stuff is just BS. there's a real possibility a crime was committed in that office. And do you think Larry Krasner in Philadelphia is going to investigate it? Do you think the Biden appointed U.S. attorney in Philadelphia is going to investigate that? No, I don't think so. So it's up to once you said, Mike, the checks and balances built in our system. There's a government oversight committee in the House. If you read the rules, it's very broad. And we got a bunch of legal gobbledygook from Brian Cutler about it. And it's like, I get it. You don't want to do anything. And you're giving us a snow job. And, we primaried him too with Ann Weston, and we were not successful. And he's another one that voted for House Bill 2060. And Brian Cutler's a nice guy. I've met him, but this isn't about being a nice guy. This is about our constitutional rights, doing your job. And it's like I know 100% guarantee if that role was reversed, if we had a Republican attorney general, there was any question of an impropriety in that office, the Democrats would have that office under investigation, hearings on television in the House and the Senate in Pennsylvania.
Take it a step further, though. Picture your average old Gun Owners of America member doing something like that, right? Not even somebody who's not even an attorney general, let's say, just an average old person. What happens to them?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's laws for thee and not for me. Right. I mean, it smacks of that. And all we did was ask for an investigation. We didn't make any wild claims that, it says we just said there's a possibility a crime may have been committed and it needs to be investigated. And we cannot trust. Do you think the AG's office is going to investigate itself? Do you think a U.S. attorney appointed by Biden and
nothing to see here, nothing to see.
The ATF is going to look at it? No, they're going to go after JSD Supply. They're going to go after a guy who's built a business from scratch and try to destroy his life and his family. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do.
What a shame. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. And you, at some point, you said you wish you would have come out with the endorsement of Kathy sooner. Do you regret that you can't have multiple people who get the stamp of approval? What happens if have you ever had something that was so close it's almost like a dead tie? They both support the Second Amendment to an equal degree. They're both true believers.
That's possible. For example, there were several House district races where we had like 5-6 candidates, and in rural Pennsylvania, they all scored 100%. They were all pro-gun, and what we did is we just told everybody how they scored, right? But when we have somebody who's a clear leader, then we will definitely try to endorse in the primary, because the primary is the time for ideological purity. It's the time where you want to pick your best candidate, because you really don't have that choice in a general election anymore when you're running 99% of the time against Democrats who are blatantly anti-gun on just about everything. So we try to endorse in the primary, and if you look at Dr. Oz's track record, it's not good. I mean, his statements on TV. I mean, we compiled a list of all the things he's done. And he says, "Oh no, I've had an epiphany. I'm now pro-gun. I've spoken to Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent has blessed me." Okay. And I said, look, I know people can change their minds. I get it. But guess what? You want to be senator in Pennsylvania on a Republican ticket. You need to at least act like you're pro-gun. So I have a lot of reason to doubt Dr. Oz's sincerity. Right now, we did not know this about Dave McCormick. And, I have some personal contacts that know him and say, no, he's a real good gun guy. I belong to a gun club with him in Tioga County. He's really so we had reason to believe that he might have been pretty good guy, right? So we tried to give him every opportunity, because when you only have really one major candidate that answers your survey, it kind of makes it hard to make a good decision. And then we just got nothing, and so we ended up pushing for Kathy, and Kathy, I have no doubt in my mind that she was with us the whole time.
She would have been amazing. It's really a real shame. And when these attacks came out, remember there was this one video that came out, really not traceable back to any particular candidate, and just total lies, total nonsense.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out where could this have come from? And it didn't say like paid for by Dr. Oz or anything like that. But it just so happens, I'm not a detective or anything, but an hour later, Dr. Oz is on Hannity parroting the same exact talking points from that video they had just been released like no more than an hour before. Coincidence, right?
Yeah, there's a super PAC called American Leadership Action. that ran a lot of those ads on. And so there were independent expenditures. And I know I run an independent expenditure committee for Pennsylvania. You cannot coordinate and with candidates, but then when you make an announcement like that, a candidate's going to run with it. Oh, look, yeah, and
so he found out just in the nick of time.
Oh, sure.
Just before the broadcast, right?
Yeah, just before the broadcast. He's in like the hair and makeup chair, and they're like, "Oh, quick, look at this video."
I have an epiphany.
So I mean, and it's shameful. That's all I can say. I'm embarrassed. I mean, GOA is nonpartisan. We endorsed Jim Brewster in the last election. He's a Democrat. We're nonpartisan. If you're a pro-gun Democrat and you got a great track record, we're going to treat you the same as a Republican, right? But as an individual, speaking just on my behalf, myself, not on behalf of GOA, as a Republican voter, and I was a former Republican committee member in Allegheny County, I'm embarrassed to be a Republican because of what I really am. I said we should not be treating our own people this way. If you can't face somebody on the issues, right, and if you're afraid and you're going to make up stuff like that, that's you're worse than the enemy, in my opinion, right?
Things are pretty crazy right now. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, so that's how afraid they are. That's how afraid they were of her making it, is they had to make stuff up. And what really scared me is that the number of people who believed it. And then we went. It was just so we were in. It wasn't even damage control mode. It's truth. Right. Espousing mode. That's what we were trying to tell people what the truth was.
You should have fact check it, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Fact checking is so 1990s.
Yeah. No.
Right. Nobody does that. Right. So we were in. Truth propagation mode. Right. That's what we were in. We're in truth propagation. We're not. It's no damage control because there was nothing. It's all BS. And so
I noticed this pattern where they just do it. They get away with it. They get what they want, and then later they might make a small apology, but by then they got what they wanted anyway.
There was no time the way it happened, right?
There was no time, so we put out what we could and basically said, and then we were in what we're trying to convince people what the truth is, and based on these false accusations, and and they probably turned, and they definitely, because look at the polls, she was almost neck and neck with them, and their strategy worked, and they were able to convince enough people that she was against. I mean, and there wasn't enough time.
It's almost more difficult to explain away something that's so wildly false because you don't know where to start. It's like, how do you prove a negative? It's almost like you're going to go up there. Remember that scene in My Cousin Vinny where they're doing the statements, and I guess he didn't realize he had to do his part, and calls him up there, and he goes up and he says, "Your Honor, everything that guy just said is baloney." I obviously can't say the word on the air.
Right.
Oh, why not?
That's basically what you
well, up is down and left is right, and
So now we still don't even have an answer. There's no winner, and even when a winner's declared, it's entirely likely that there will be a recount because it will be within the margin where that's required, right?
Right, and then there's absentee ballots that I think have to be counted, and there's who knows what the military. Those are usually military ballots, so we'll see if that changes anything for McCormick in this case.
I think it will. I was reading an article earlier that said something along the lines of from the absentees that they were receiving, he was gaining 70 on Oz for every 1,500 that came in, and based on what was left over, he would be overtaking Oz if that rate continued. And that's obviously not scientific or anything like that, but it was trending in that direction. And I think that's probably what we want as gun owners, no? Even though he didn't do the justice of getting the survey back to you.
Right. And honestly, I think he was trying to follow the Youngkin model. I mean, Youngkin in Virginia did not answer any surveys, and
really?
And and this is catching on. And now I bet you he's regretting it because when you're less than 2,000 votes away, and you have a major national organization, we got a lot of members and supporters in Pennsylvania. If he would have answered the right way, we could have turned that election for him, easily.
What do you think the logic behind not responding to the surveys would be? The Youngkin model, like you're saying, is it that you can go out there and tout, "I'm not beholden to any organization"?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a congressional candidate, Deliker, up in I think he's from Carbon County. He was tried that too and said the same thing. But the other thing is, and there's another reason why you don't want to answer the surveys. You don't want to go on record. That's, I think, definitely why Oz didn't do it. Okay, and McCormick might have juggled it and thought and was in between somewhere. I mean, if I go on, I don't want to go on record, and and then look at Youngkin. He was successful, and then I won't be holding to anybody. But the bottom line is, it leaves voters in the dark, right?
Sure. Especially if you're not a career politician, right?
Right.
If that's your plus, is I'm not a career politician, and you're going to use that as a strength. Well, then how do we know what you're going to do once you get in there? You don't
Right.
have a voting record.
So you can make an ad with you on TV with your brand new Cabela's, a hunting outfit that's never been used, and standing out in the field somewhere, and that'll resonate with Pennsylvania gun owners, and that's and just give people platitudes and generalities how pro Second Amendment you are. Prove it. It's not hard. It takes maybe 15 minutes to answer our survey.
Do you think the strategy with Kathy was because they did it all in the end, so she couldn't even respond?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I got so many text messages. Then it was Fox News. It was every channel was against her. I've never gotten so many messages.
Right.
Yeah.
And she didn't even have a chance to respond.
No chance to respond. It was saturation bombing, and then, like I said, we were in truth propagation mode after that, and then then people would argue with me. Oh no, I can't trust it. Donald Trump said she couldn't be trusted. There was things in her past, and I don't know why he said that.
Very disappointed in that.
And it's like he contributed to the perpetuating the lies against her by saying that. And then in the same breath, he said, but she's got a bright future in Republican politics.
She's crazy. She's nuts. She's no good.
Okay.
I hope you vote for her some other time.
Get fired. Come back next year.
Come back next year.
I don't get it, to be honest with you. So
this also somewhat disproves the notion that Trump supporters and people who voted for him are a bunch of cult followers. They're following their cult leader, because he went out there in support of Dr. Oz, and he's got a fraction of the vote here in Pennsylvania. I'd presume that close to 100% of the voting population in this primary voted for Trump at least one election, and a small percentage of that ends up voting for his candidate. So if these people, if the Republican voters, or the people voting in the Republican primaries, at least, because we've got our gripes with the establishment Republicans, obviously, but if they see something that doesn't smell right to them, they seem to go in a different direction, don't they?
Well, I mean, he definitely blew it on Oz. I mean, there was a lot of blowback on that because of all of his, particularly among our people who saw how anti-gun his past has been, and on his TV show and his public statements. So that, and I think the last minute Mastriano endorsement was an attempt to reverse that, and right, to bring back some I'm going to really support a strong person, you know what I mean? I think that's why he came in at the last minute. Doug was ahead by 10 points at least before that. He would have won even without Trump.
Regardless.
I know for sure, because he was so ahead in the polls. But
did Trump really have a choice? Because didn't Doug come out in support of him in the wake of the 2020 election?
He did, of course. And but the other thing, was it was done at the last minute. It was on Saturday, right before the election.
Oh, wow.
Tuesday, Saturday morning. I mean, he could have done it sooner. And I think he got a lot of blowback on Oz. And then there was the smear campaign. Then it shifted to the smear campaign and Kathy. And unfortunately, President Trump condoned that by his statements. And it didn't take much to just, like Google search and reading an article or two to figure out that it's wrong. It's a lie. Right.
I think a lot of people liked him because he was so outspoken during the pandemic too. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think at the beginning I said, people saw him as a leader, standing up for some business owners, and sort of like around the clock diner here in York, wanting to stay open, and they were taking precautions and determining who was essential and who was non-essential, and by fiat, governed by fiat. And he did take a stand and stood with the people, and that really built his grassroots network. Then we came along, in 2021, with backing him on the Second Amendment stuff with Senate Bill 624, and he developed a good following with the Second Amendment supporters, with GOA people, because of his leadership in the Senate. And that just doesn't that's just his history. If you look at his record, his retired colonel and Army War College professor, he's a man of integrity, and people want that. They don't want a swamp dweller, coming in to Pennsylvania. And so I'm glad we were successful. I mean, this was GOA's big race. We getting Doug elected. We worked so hard for him. We started even before he announced officially, and then after he announced, we've been working nonstop, and I've spoken at multiple locations at the same time with him, and then there's a lies that they're saying, he'll never be able to beat Shapiro in the fall, and I'm like, I don't agree with that. I mean, look what they said the same thing about Trump. He'll never be able to beat Hillary Clinton. And I think, Mastriano has a strong grassroots support from his leadership during the pandemic. And I think what you're going to see is that that's going to spill over into some Democrat voters and independent voters who will come on to his side and elect him.
Now, it does feel like it's been an eternity since we've had a Republican governor in Pennsylvania,
Yes.
But really, it's only been one administration, right? We had Tom Corbett.
Yep. 8 years of Wolf.
Right. It's felt like a very, very long time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of anti-Biden sentiment out there now, of course, because of,
I don't understand how anybody could look around in this country and say, this is exactly what I was
Yeah,
hoping
he's been
for.
kind of growing
glad
on
I
me.
cast that vote. if you were given $1 million to try to make it as bad as possible, Dr. Bell, could you do as well as he has done?
No,
It's pretty impressive.
He screwed up the free lunch, the proverbial free lunch. Let me tell you. I mean,
it has to be by design, right? At this point, this has to be on purpose, right?
I think so. I mean, it's horrible.
I don't know if you could do this bad on purpose.
Maybe that's a good point, Mike. Actually,
you ever
might be onto
throw
something, yeah.
throw a piece of paper backwards with your eyes closed and it makes it into the waste paper basket, and you turn around and say, if I tried to do that, I couldn't have done
Right,
that.
right, exactly.
It's like a 1 in a million.
Let's see if I can do everything 100% wrong.
So is that the reason why people are saying that, the naysayers saying Doug doesn't have a chance and Shapiro is going to win, is because of just the sheer amount of Democrats you have in Allegheny County and in Philadelphia?
There's that, and they're saying, oh no, he's part of the Jace, he was an insurrectionist, and these lies, no more lies, right? I mean, because you went to a rally in Washington D.C., that makes you an insurrectionist.
I did see an article about that. They say that he attended a rally or something like that.
I think if you were on the East Coast that day, you were an insurrectionist.
Right. I mean,
didn't say he stormed the Capitol or anything.
I thought about DC.
Even though you and I think I did send you a while ago. There was this article that popped up through. I don't even know how it came up because I don't subscribe to the news feed that it came up on, but it said something along the lines of, legislature who stormed the Capitol is running for office or some nonsense like that. And frankly, I said he should sue because that's ridiculous.
It is. I remember I brought that to his attention, and and it is. It's like, I guess that's libel, right? Libelous.
Absolutely, because that's provably false. It's demonstrably false. They're putting it out there. And they're reckless. If they didn't know it was false, then it's a reckless disregard for the truth, is what they say, legally speaking.
Right.
It's basically, I don't know, but I don't care to find out. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Right. Yeah, and then look what's happening right now with the Supreme Court justices.
Sure.
Protests in front of their houses. Violence is threatened. And where's Josh Shapiro in denouncing real terroristic threats against Supreme Court justices? Where is his call? Where is Josh Shapiro's call for investigations? Were there any people from Pennsylvania involved? And if there are, is he going to get to the bottom of it? That's what I want to know, because he sure wanted to get to bottom to everybody who might have been at the rally at on J6, right?
Sure.
That's an
Right.
interesting point. I've not heard anybody turn it around sort of like that. We've got Len Larson in the comments over here. Give him a hey now, Philly Chris.
Hey now, Len Larson. Hey
His
now.
comment is beautiful here. He says, "We're living in a political Brewster's Millions." You ever see that movie? It's Richard Pryor. He receives an inheritance, but the condition is that he has to spend a certain amount of money with nothing to show for it in order to get the real inheritance. So he's doing everything he can to waste the money.
Yeah, and with Shapiro, I would just say, if Democrats didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all, right?
Sure.
I mean, so that's exactly what this is. I mean, there's utter silence about terroristic threats and violence against Supreme Court justices, but if you showed up a rally and stood outside the Capitol in Washington D.C., that makes you an insurrectionist.
How
So
much
are we
further
gonna-
do you? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Dr. Val, Colonel Val, like how much further do you think this is going to go before it potentially turns around? Like, what is your outlook on this craziness at this point?
Oh, you mean
in the history of our in the country?
Oh, I don't know. I think it turns around when the people vote and really just stop supporting the candidates who are part of the problem in both parties. Again, plenty of we just talked about all the issues in the Republican Party and the lies with Kathy, right?
Right.
I mean, we've got a clean house. You start. You always discipline begins at home. Clean your own house up. The first thing Republicans have to do is stop lying about candidates. Stop the rhino establishment from putting malleable, middle of the road, milquetoast candidates who could care less about your constitutional rights in office,
Right.
who will just do the bidding of the fundraisers in Washington. That's what they want. Okay, but the people, our founders created the system that we have for a reason. Every 2 years, state representatives, every 2 years, Congress is up for re-election. That means every 2 years, that entire place can be new.
Right.
And people just have to, and I see this on the side of campaigns and candidates, they need to better prepare themselves. And that's another problem I see that would help.
What are your thoughts on the voter integrity stuff? Like, I don't know if you've seen like the 2,000 mules or anything like that, or you care to comment.
But yes, okay. So voter integrity, I think that first of all, in Pennsylvania, we got elect Mastriano so we can repeal Act 77. If the Supreme Court, if our SCOPA does not declare it unconstitutional first, I mean,
which I don't know how they can. There's a problem visually with that because you have the bums who voted for it having to go back there and say, "Oh, wait, hold on, guys, I'm sorry, it's actually unconstitutional, so please strike it down."
About that, right?
Yeah,
you really need to think that through. I know. I mean, so I think we have to repeal Act 77. I mean, and voter integrity has to be part of that, and people have to be confident in that we don't have fraudulent elections. I think so. Moving forward, I'm not a person that believes that we should go back and look at decertify things and do all that. I mean, there's so many people who are caught in the past, and they're so focused on that, and they may have some good points and arguments. I'm not saying they don't, right? But because of that, they're so focused, they're not paying attention to right now, right? And the now is to elect the elected people that can turn that around. If we get Doug in there, Doug Mastriano is elected as governor, we will repeal Act 77. And GOA is fully supportive. And we actually scored the bills on repealing Act 77. And we were tracking those bills. And whether it's constitutional, we can do a constitutional amendment to turn that around. Again, but I think everybody's waiting to see what SCOPA is going to do, our Lord and Masters and Saviors, SCOPA, that controls the state. Elections, everything. We just SCOPA. That's right. This is like crazy. Right.
I can't see how they don't strike it down, though. Logically, I don't know how you get there.
Well, we have a gun registry that's not a registry. That was created.
That is true. I love the dissent in that case, though. It's like, hold on a second here. Am I taking crazy pills or something? This looks an awful lot like a registry.
Right. I know it's like you go to high school civics class and you learn that committees are supposed to consider legislation and the courts are unbiased and they're supposed to and apply the law, and then the real world isn't the case. Everybody's has got their agenda, they're out to implement their agenda, and they just try to make it look like, and put some veneer of objectivity on it, and we see a lot of that coming out of courts, right? So but I think it's what changes it. I think we, on the side of candidates, and I think this is very important, I see a lot of candidates who are just not prepared to run for office. Okay. And they get out there and they don't do a good job. And I'm not, these are new people. I get it, but they got to educate themselves. They got to be dedicated to it. If you're running for a state legislative office, you better be out there, shoe leather, knocking on doors. First of all, that's the first question I ask candidates is, how many doors have you knocked on? And then raising funds, doing it the
Especially
right way.
now.
Yeah, and that's what gets them elected. So we have to educate them. Otherwise, let me tell you, you don't need money. The DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, have systematically gone through Allegheny County, have taken out the old blue dog Democrats, and they're young kids, and they do it by knocking on doors and really working. So you're rewarded in politics is because they use the right political technology. Political technology determines political success, the right use of it. So they're using the right political technology. They're doing the right things. And for state small races, it's knocking on doors and meeting voters. They'll win. Eventually, they will win. And our people cannot win this, but they think they're going to get an ego boost and put some yard signs up. It doesn't work. Okay. So that's another problem that'll turn this around. We need good candidates, educated, dedicated candidates. And voters have to start taking an interest and thinking for themselves, and using organizations they trust, like GOA and other groups. If you're pro-life, again, we're Second Amendment only, but I'm just throwing this out there. If you're pro-life, look at some pro-life groups and see how they rate candidates, and then put it together and then vote for the best person, right? And think for yourself. If you see attack ads coming from, super PACs, read about it. Fact check it yourself, right? Don't just believe what somebody says.
That's a heck of a concept.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, right? This is what changes it. So you have to do that as a voter. And people say, well, why did you endorse this person, over this? I said, ma'am, I would tell people this. Look, we're a Second Amendment organization. That's what we're focused on. I said, you as a voter have to take our information that you might appreciate and respect and synthesize that with your other values and beliefs. And then you, as the voter, pick the candidate that you want. How's that sound? Right? I mean, that
sounds reasonable.
Right.
Reasonable, yeah.
What do you mean you didn't look up all the different things for me, Dr. Val?
I mean, really, we're a gun group. We focus on guns.
So speaking of which, when you're taking a look at the primaries and these Republicans used a bunch of words like milk toast and things of that nature.
Yes.
And it reminded me of one of the primary races that was going on. Is it not true that there's a Republican candidate in Bucks County who was endorsed by 2 gun control groups?
That's a good question. Which race are you thinking of?
Fitzpatrick receives endorsements from 2 more gun control groups.
Oh yeah, Fitzpatrick. I didn't get involved in congressional races too much this time around.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you're talking about Russ for a minute.
So this is the headline. This is the headline. I'm reading it.
He did. Interesting. I'll pass it along to our federal director.
Yeah, that might be important information.
So which
for the
groups was
Second
it?
Amendment, right? With that.
What groups endorsed him?
Well, that's a good question. They're going to make me scroll all the way down here.
No, don't worry about it.
Let's see. Moms Demand Action.
Okay.
And Brady PAC.
The usual suspects.
And Gun Owners of America.
Yeah, GOA.
No, just kidding.
Yeah. I mean,
anti-gun owners.
Here's a perfect. We had a candidate that we were looking at to endorse, actually. And they took her to court and invalidated her ballots. And
Really?
the rhinos do this all the time. Lisa Baker did it up in Pike County. So there was only one candidate left, and that was Alex Enton, I think his name was, in that district. He was the Moldavan. I think he's from Moldavia. So he was the only person left that was going to challenge Fitzpatrick. And you want to talk about having a candidate with no money with somebody with multi-millions of dollars in the bank. So it's very hard for that candidate to win an election. Yeah.
And
So
it's just because they go out there and put their signs all over the place, and people are like, oh yeah, I recognize that name. I'll go with them.
yeah. So we'll be more engaged in the general election, I would assume, with a lot of these congressional races.
But what are you gonna do? You gonna endorse say vote for the Democrat instead? How bad do they gotta be? If this guy's
stay out of the race in that case with Fitzpatrick, if you don't have a good primary candidate to challenge someone, and then you don't have any choice in the general election, the best thing is to stay out of it, really.
Yeah.
Bring
somebody in.
We'll probably endorse Scott Perry again. I think Jeremy Schaefer won in PA 17. That was Connor Lamb's seat. So we may be I don't want to speak out of turn, but we may be making an endorsement in that race for the general election. So you'll see.
Smoked, didn't he?
Who's that?
Connor Lamb.
Yeah. Look, Fetterman's got a
smoked.
Oh,
yeah, he's gonna be a problem. I said that on this show last week that no matter who we run out there on the Senate, he's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, he's a strong candidate, and he's got a lot of big following. So is Shapiro, a very strong candidate for their sides. And so
you send Fetterman a survey?
Yeah, I think we probably did send him one, but no response.
No response.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's a GOA. I'm a state director, and then we have a federal side. So the federal side controls a lot of the stuff related to Congress and the U.S. Senate. So I don't have as much say as I do like on state races. I scrap on the state races more than I do the federal stuff. But for the general election, I'll be more involved with the federal side too.
At the very least, we could say that Fetterman is not completely anti-private gun ownership based upon
his own personal action.
Went out to take care of business. That's funny. I wonder if that's going to come up. Was somebody on the Republican side going to bring that out?
I would hope they do. I would love for Kathy.
That might just gain, but don't you think that might just gain him more supporters to say, yeah, you know what, the Second Amendment's a pretty important issue for me. He's just like me. He's a gun guy.
Right. Well, speaking of counter tactics like that, I got mailers from Democrats about how Mastriano would continue another 4 years of the Trump administration in Pennsylvania. So a Democratic mailer sent to a Republican voter. So they're definitely trying to get Doug elected. So they were thinking they want him to be in, and so they think that he's the person to beat.
Interesting.
I think So Democrats were sending mailers to Republicans telling them how pro-Trump Mastriano was, and I think it was to gear up support for him. And you know what? I think they're dead wrong. I think it's going to backfire on them. Connor Lamb tried to do the same thing with AR-15, showing himself with the AR-15s and stuff like that. But that backfired. But it's like with the Mastriano thing, I really think it's going to backfire on them because they,
Why would you go after him? That seems like the last one you'd.
Yeah, they think he's beatable, so they want to run against him. So that's why they sent it out. And I think they're dead wrong. All right, and it's kind of another Trump situation.
Who would they think wouldn't be beatable out of that field then?
Maybe
because he smoked everyone.
Lies about him ready to go.
Right.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly right.
That could be it.
And it's going to be the mantra is going to be insurrection, right?
Gotcha.
That's going to be every other word. If you read every media report, in the first sentence, and he was president on January 6th. I mean, it's just like, over and over again. And they think that's going to stick. But if there's no truth, again, there's no truth in it. But if you repeat a lie enough times, they hope that it'll be believed, right?
Doesn't seem to matter.
But I think it's going to be. I think you're going to see. My prediction is it's going to be another Trump situation in a smaller scale, just in Pennsylvania. He's got popular support. He's got the grassroots behind him, and he's going to be able to get the Democratic and independent vote to carry him over, just because people need to get the state back on track again.
Right. The whole he was in town thing is really ridiculous. It reminds me of that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where somebody is saying that their relative died on 9/11 and everybody's giving them all this sympathy, and they find out that they died on 9/11, but it was in a completely different state. It had nothing to do with 9/11 that we know about.
Right.
Like, wait a second.
Right. It's like that. It's guilt by association, painting everybody with a broad brush. And I just think you'll see the lies mounting. And then we gave our Republican leaders on a silver platter something that Josh Shapiro did that must be investigated. And let's not forget there could very well be a crime that office committed in making that P80 kit and transferring it, or maybe giving it to the NBC reporter. So I mean, if you don't investigate, if you don't issue subpoenas, if you don't cross-examine people, how do you arrive at the truth? Right? How do you get to the truth? If you value the truth, you find a way to get to it.
Right.
And I wonder if our leaders really value the truth,
Good
or
point.
are they really just trying to preserve their own political behinds? And
I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
We've only got a few minutes here left, Dr. Val. So I do want to talk about where this is all headed politically, because we saw this atrocity take place in the news. And of course, the anti-gunners don't let atrocities go to waste, and they try to use them to push their agenda and fit their narrative. So what do you foresee happening in these next few weeks? Do you see anything happening in terms of legislation? Do you think we're going to see any additional executive orders? And as gun owners, what are we going to do to try to stop it?
So obviously you're speaking of the Buffalo mass shooting, right?
I am. I try to give it as little specific attention as possible.
Well, first of all, I mean, New York is the most anti-gun state probably that there is.
Right.
So if a little gun control doesn't work, more might be better, but they had a whole lot of gun control that didn't work. And so what's their response? Governor Holken is more gun control, right? So they're going to stiffen up red flag laws and a bunch of other stuff. We put an alert out into New York today to oppose the governor's executive orders. So in New York, they're kind of have a Soviet mentality there to begin with. So they're going to try to toughen the law. And I think what you'll see is more calls in Washington for the usual things. The low hanging fruit is red flag laws, but this individual evidently could have been red flagged.
Yeah, I heard that.
New York, and was not red flagged, right? So it's like we see over and over again, either in red flag with states with the red flag laws, either it was completely missed, or there were no red flags, right? So in this case, it was a case that was missed. They was a guy, they didn't apply the red flag law, or there were no red flags. So so the response is to toughen the law up and make it more strict, and maybe it'll catch somebody. It probably won't. It hasn't shown to work anywhere else that I know of. Now, I mean, the anti-gunners have their research, but when we've got research too. I think they did a 10-year study in California on it, and they showed it didn't reduce any murders or suicides in California. There was a 10-year study that was done on their red flag law. So
as a physician, Dr. Val, if somebody came to you and they had some kind of an ailment and you assessed them and you said, I'm sorry you're in so much pain. This is a horrible thing, but there's nothing we can do to make this better right now. And they say, well, we got to do something, right? We got to do something, because that's always the anti-gunner side. Say, I want you to chop off my hand. And he said, well, no, that's actually going to make things worse if I chop off your hand. And they say, no, well, we can't do nothing. We got to do something, so chop off my hand. Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, that is a fair analogy. And that's why medicine is not a martial art. Okay, because if we do something, we could do all kinds of things to you to make things worse, right?
I was at the doctor earlier.
I know, and
sorry.
It's analogous to, so we're going to do something, and that something always amounts to people like you and me losing our constitutional rights in their plan. They'll never let a tragedy go to waste. Let me tell you.
I said at one time where, let's say that you got starving people in some part of the world, and you had these ground up pieces of rubber dipped in chemicals that were left over for some job site. And the solution was, okay, well, we've got to feed these starving people, so we're going to feed them these ground up rubber pieces that are dipped in chemicals. And you say, hold on, wait a second. That might not be such a good idea. That might do more harm than good. They say, well, mister, you can't just do nothing. These people are starving over here. So we're going to feed them these ground up rubber pieces dipped in chemicals. And that's exactly the conversation you have with these anti-gunners.
That's exactly right. You
I
got
heard
it.
in a few months they're going to be giving that out in the food lines at their
Well, anti-gunners have first priority. They get
Right,
to go to the
right.
front of the line.
We'll print some coupons. Yeah.
Any parting words, Dr. Val? I've had a blast today.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. It was great. And if you don't mind, if people want to join GOA, we can sure use your help. We need everybody on board to get Doug Mastriano elected in the fall and to fight these anti-gun bills and to get pro-gun bills passed. They can go to gunowners.org/join. Gunowners.org/join. You can sign up for $25.
It's called gunowners.org/join, ladies
Got
and
it.
gentlemen.
Do it now.
Do it. They're doing great work to help protect our Second Amendment rights. He is the best friend of the Mike G in the Morning program, Dr. Val. Thanks for joining us. That's all the time we've got for today. Stick around for We the People, the Constitution Matters. Pastor David Whitney, Professor Phil Duffy. I'll be joining as your legal analyst. We miss you, Ellie.